So Niamh, we are here for our last session. Please give a very big round of applause for Niamh as well. She's been an absolute superstar today.
That's so nice. That's so kind. A lovely lady came up to me and just spoke to me and said, "Are you picking the songs as well, Niamh?" And I said, "Yes." And she was very happy to hear that. Okay, let's move on because this is so exciting. To close out day one, our headline session today is with radio royalty, as we go behind the scenes of the world of audio with a broadcasting icon, a music star turned breakfast host, and my big boss at Bauer. So do me a favor and cheer nice and loudly for Gary Stein, Director of Audio at Bauer Media, presenter of Hits Radio Breakfast, Fleur East, and the living legend that is Greatest Hits Radio's Ken Bruce.
Well, this is exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I believe this is the last session of the day. So you can go to the pub after this. Some people have already been to the pub, Ken Bruce.
Sorry, that's a false start.
So we're delighted to be here. So let me introduce the very legendary panel that I have got to chat to about all things audio and all things radio today. First of all, a man who has been in radio for a long time, possibly before some people in this room were born, Ken Bruce.
Certainly
from
before
Greatest
some
Hits
people were
Radio.
born.
And somebody who's not been in radio for that long, but started off and still as a singer, but now doing a breakfast show on a national radio station on Hits, Fleur East. So please give them both a big round of applause. So we're going to talk today about all the lessons we've had from our broadcast careers to date, and that what can be applied not just to radio, but also for people in this room that maybe not just in radio, but other audio as well, so podcasts and social media, etc. So first question, what goes into a show for millions of listeners 5 days a week? How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep radio fresh every single day? I'm going to start with Ken, because you started in radio, Ken, in 1980.
Well, actually, 70.
Oh, was it? I was trying to be polite.
You say millions of people. The whole point of radio is that you're talking to one person all the time. It is only one person who's listening to you. As soon as you start to think about millions of people, the magic goes out the window. Yep. You're only talking to one person. You don't need to imagine the person. You just need to know that you're having an intimate conversation with somebody. They may share some of your interests, they may not. You have to explain a few things because they don't know everything about you. But it's somebody you know well, you have a relationship with already because you were on yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. And so it's just the renewal every day of an old friendship. And that is the magic of radio. It's talking to people, and they change. You know, since 1977, there's been an entire generational change, if not two, since I started on radio. But you're still talking to the same person, pretty much. And it's that intimate communication that is the magic of radio.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Fleur, for you, because you're a lot newer to radio. You've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah, 5 years now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Someone said the other day, you've been doing this half a decade. And I was like, whoa. So half a decade of waking up at 4:30 a.m. Man, I look very different now. I look like 2 generations of us. Yeah, we do a lot of planning. A lot goes into our breakfast show. Our lives go into our breakfast show. I think what makes it tick is bringing our everyday lives into it. So it's funny because my sister's like, gosh, everything for you is content. Because everywhere we go, if I hear like a piece of audio or something that's funny, I'm getting my phone out. I mean, if anyone listened to my voice notes and my voice recordings on my phone, they'd be like, what does this woman do? So the funniest thing was, I think just a couple of weeks ago, I went into this apartment building and I got into the lift. And as soon as I walked in, the voice in the lift was saying, my doors are closing. That's interesting. You're on my 2nd floor. My doors are opening. And as soon as I got out of the lift, I was like, okay, sorry, I've got to go back down because I need to get that. So it's like constant mining. I think it's like everything you do and everything you see and everything you hear and conversations that you have, just day-to-day life, I think goes into making a show and just keeping it as authentic as possible.
And this year's been a massive change for you because you've had a little girl called Nova.
Yes.
And she is now 7 months old.
Yeah, nearly 7 months.
And you've just recently come back to presenting Daily Breakfast. How's having a new member of the family changed
Well, it's kind of
balance?
opened up another door. So I think for maybe a lot of people who aren't parents yet, you kind of think, oh, I'm going to become a mum. What am I going to have to talk about? Like, I feel like I won't have anything to say. And it's almost like I have even more to say. And there's so many more people that I can relate to on a different level.
Yeah.
I mean, I came back and just spoke about punamis, and there was an entire phone-in about that. So, yeah, wealth of content now.
Fleur was telling me before we came out that actually Nova doesn't say any words yet, 7 months, but she does sing.
She does sing.
She does sing.
She's had music around her throughout the pregnancy and for her whole 6-7 months of life.
Following in mum's footsteps. So, Ken, from your years of broadcasting, what do you find really kind of resonates the most with listeners? What are the things that you really see a reaction to?
Well, it's shared experiences, just as Fleur was saying. It's things that happen to almost everybody. My experience is very different to yours because I don't react to things until weeks later. You know, something will happen to me and it will go in and it will stew around there and it will only come out just at some point where maybe a lyric in a song triggers it. Or something that somebody has written on an email, think, oh yes, and that'll come out then. So I don't react to, I mean, things that happened months ago, in some cases years ago, will come out on air. But it is always the shared experience. It's something that everybody has happened to them or could have happened to them at some time. And making people feel part of that. What you want is people to say, oh yes, that's right, that happened to me. That's the key to it. But if you plan these things too much, I don't think it works. You know, it's got to be organic and happen in the moment, in real. And that's why, for me, live radio is all that counts, really. I mean, if I have to record anything, it just goes to pigs and whistles. It's terrible. It's rubbish. I fluff and I make mistakes. But if I'm live, it sort of happens, and you think more clearly, you think quicker, and out it comes. And that, for me, I'm a live broadcaster, I can't be anything else, but that's what I do, and if I ever had to stop doing that, I'd just go into a small little, puddle in the ground. I'd be hopeless.
I think it's also one of the reasons that radio has endured so well over the years, because it is the difference, isn't it? That liveness is really important, and every day that is, you couldn't record a breakfast show because it's so focused around what's going on in everybody's lives, but that sense of day, I suppose, as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we have families listening to us every morning. We play games every morning, and we know all of the listeners that are going to text in and going to call in at the same time. You know, we get in and we have this listener called Tony. He's amazing. And we can guarantee within the first 15 minutes of the show, he's sent in a voice note to our WhatsApp number. Just all day, he just sends in these jokes. So we're like, oh, Tony's up. You know, it's like we wake up with individuals and we know their lives because they share so much of their stories with us. And yeah, it's really nice. It's like you have this huge family that is connected through the show.
What obviously, from a musical background, what have you been able to take from that you brought into the world of broadcasting?
Well, I think it gives me a unique perspective in the sense that I've been on the other side. And I've done like a PR run of different interviews with different radio stations, and going into a room and having like the 11th interview of the day and being asked the same question over and over again and trying to think of a creative way to answer it. So I know that when artists come in to speak to us, we're probably going to be like the 11th or 12th interview of the day. So we need to make it interesting. So I think, having been on the other side, I get to connect to them in a different way. I know exactly where they're coming from, so we get to make it a bit more exciting. And then I get to bring my musical gift to the show. So we have a feature called the Rap Roulette that we do every Friday. And I get to write a rap every week about something that's going on in the world. And get to sing, get to perform, do different things like that. So I think that makes the show sound fresh.
Yeah. Over the years, radio has, or certainly technology's changed a lot, and the process, I suppose, of creating a show has possibly changed. So when you started, Ken, I would imagine all the correspondence was literally on in a letter.
Yeah, postcards.
On postcards.
Yeah. When I started at Radio 2, there was no producer present in the room. There was you and a technical operator. And there was a box. And the box had, maybe 20 or 30 discs in it, LPs usually, some singles. And there were also some reel-to-reel tapes. And we had music played off reel-to-reel tapes, which was by the BBC orchestras covering pop songs or doing light music, or freelance groups perhaps. But maybe a third of the program was on tape and recorded by the BBC because of needle time restrictions, which I'm sure you know all about. The rest was discs played off 3 decks in the studio with a wind-up time of at least half a turn. So you had to wind it back and think, all right, press the button. And the postcards, there was a bundle of postcards in the box put there by the producer the day before, wrapped up by an elastic band. And you just read out bits from those and made a conversation out of it. But you knew that when you started a theme, it would be 3-4 days before you got a reply to that theme.
Oh, yeah.
So like today, you say something and it's, somebody's emailed you within 10 seconds. But no, you had to wait until Thursday after Monday before somebody responded. So you had to keep all these themes going at the time. And simply the physical act of changing the discs I couldn't do it now, I'm far too old for it. But you were doing something, 60s discs were 2 minutes and 40 seconds, if that. Some were 1 minute 34 in duration. So you were whopping them on, queuing them up, and then having to think about what you might say. So things are much, much easier now, and the response is so much quicker. Whether it's better or not, I couldn't say, but in those days, you
get instant feedback.
You get instant feedback. In those days, you had to wait for your feedback, but sometimes it was more considered, so it was better able to be used. But while that's all changed, the basic communication, the one-to-one, and the response back is a two-way communication. You say something, and you get something back. Whether it takes 3 or 4 days or 10 seconds, it's still coming back to you. And that's where, people almost, for years, people have been saying to me, radio's dead, dying, it's finished. Yeah. In the 70s, they were saying that to me, and I thought, well, no, I don't believe it is, because there's a person there. It's a human interaction. And while that remains, radio will always have some kind of life.
Yep. And even I think the last 5 years since you've been presenting the breakfast show, things have changed as well, because it was a lot more phone calls. Now it's voice notes on WhatsApp. And I think you were the first person, I think, in Europe to do an AI sort of version of, you weren't there one morning, I think you were doing, was it this morning?
I went on to GMB.
GMB,
yes.
Yeah, and we decided a bit of stunt was in order, and there was an AI version of you doing the show, which they then got coverage on GMB, etc.
Yes.
But it didn't go down well with the audience.
It didn't go down well. It required so many people as well to put together, because to try and get an AI version of a presenter to have banter with co-hosts and understand sarcasm and deliver things in the right tone and to have humour, things like that. It was really, really difficult. And James and Matt, who I do the breakfast show with, they were struggling. They were struggling to interact with this AI Fleur. She even got on the phone to my mum, nearly managed to fool my mum that it was me, until I think the second word that she said, and my mum was like, "You're not my daughter. Who is this?" And I was like, "Yes, Mum." She tried to flirt with my husband. She was quite successful, actually, for about a minute. I was like, "Babe, so what's going on here?" But all in all, it was fun to do.
Yeah.
But I don't think AI is going to replace us. Like
you worried about that, Ken? Yeah,
well, no, I've already had something similar happen to me when Rob Brydon sat in for me. And he did the whole show in my voice and did it rather better than I would normally do it. And so much so that I was at home listening to it, and my sister phoned my wife and said, "He's drunk. What's he doing? He's drunk on the radio. Get him off." And I said, she said, "It's not him, it's Rob Brydon." "No, I know it's him. He's drunk. Get him off." So, I mean, Rob Brydon is 10 times better than any AI you could ever hope to have. He's probably more expensive, though. That's it.
Yeah.
First and only time he's covered for you. Have you got a memorable lesson from either of your broadcast careers, either learned the hard way or something that's gone really well for you or very badly? So, Fleur.
Yeah, straight away I can think of a lesson that I had to learn the hard way. So waking up in the mornings very early, I mean, your brain's quite foggy at the best of times. And by like 9 a.m., you feel like you've had a whole day. And I remember we were interviewing Coldplay, and our team put together all the questions. We'd sent them in through the week, and then we sort of had this prep in front of us. And I think I looked over it maybe a minute before Chris Martin came in to do this interview. And I'm looking down, I'm like, okay, new single, blah, 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 blah. So I go into it. I'm like, right, okay, we're so excited for your new single, Power. Can't wait for everyone to hear it. And I could see Chris Martin's face just drop as I was asking this question. I was like, what's his beef? Like, why is he so moody today? And then he just sort of interjected as I was asking the question. He went, I'm sorry, the song's called Higher Power. And I just froze. And I looked down at the notes and I was like, oh my God, it says Power. Who's done this? Like straight away, I'm like, who do I have to blame? But instantly, I learned such a tough lesson. And he just said to me, I'm sorry, I can't continue this. Like, you need to know the title of the song. And I was just like, ooh, I was like, fair enough. Yeah, no. Yeah, okay, let's just start again. And just ask the question again. But I learned a very valuable lesson that although you have a team that work to put things together, you need to do your own research.
Yep. Yeah.
You can't just try and scrape through an interview. You can't try and blag it. And people know as well if you're genuinely interested in what they have to say. And so ever since then, I dedicate time to do my research.
Although you obviously pulled it back because Chris Martin, after, I don't know if it was that interview, but then invited you to perform with him on stage.
It was the subsequent interview
Or was it
after
the
which I'd done so much research.
Okay.
I knew the album inside and out and referenced one of the songs on the album. And after that, Chris, he did ask me to perform that song on stage with Coldplay. And that's what it led to.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I think it was a bit harsh, really. You got half right, didn't you? I mean, you got
Half right, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I learned similarly, prepare, but don't over-prepare. If you over-prepare, you take all the spontaneity out of it. No, prepare. Know who you're talking to. Well, I had that once in Scotland where I was doing quite a busy show. We were pre-recording, luckily, and I was sitting in the studio, and this guy was ushered in. I had no idea who he was. I had a clue who he was. And I had no notes or anything. And so, hello, how are you? I said, just to say for level, your name and what you do. And so he gave his name, Peter Casson, right? How are you spelling that? C-A-S-S-O-N. Yeah, thank you, got that. And so, sorry, you do, just, instead of saying what you have for your breakfast, just say what you do. I said, I'm the secretary of the League of Professional Hypnotherapist Performers, Hypnosis Performers. And I said, lovely. And I thought, there we are, I've got enough for an interview now. I knew I could at least ask him a question or two, but I had literally no clue who this man was. But we did a quite successful interview at the end of it. And at the end, he said, by the way, my name is Kesson, not Casson. And I thought, all right, okay, that's fine. Sounds the same on the radio, but spelled slightly differently. But to know who you're speaking to is the basis. Whether people have forgotten to tell you, or whether you have not read your research, know who you're talking to, but allow for things to happen. Just leave some space for a bit of magic to happen.
Yeah. You mentioned Chris Martin and Coldplay. In terms of guests over the years, who would you say is the guest that has left the biggest impression with you, Ken?
Maybe Carole King. I had Carole King in the studio. She was sat at the piano. And we had just a natural, it seemed to me, conversation talking about her music. She would illustrate it with a little tinkle on the piano, and then she'd do a song. And I just thought, this is perfect. I could not hope to have had this earlier in my life, to speak to Carole King while she's playing the piano and singing a song or two. The same with James Taylor. I mean, maybe it's my age, but I mean, James Taylor sang Happy Birthday to me in the studio one day, and I thought, that's it. There's nothing left in life to achieve. But earlier, way back in the 80s, I was on stage with Ella Fitzgerald, so That was probably the very peak.
Whoa.
Well,
You
Fleur, I
can't get better.
don't know how you're going to be.
I don't think you can ask me the question. I mean, is there...
Is there anybody since you've been?
Yes, for me, I'd have to say Pink. I got to sit down with her and do a good 45-minute chat with her. And she, for me, was a huge inspiration growing up. And I remember listening to her, one of her singles, Family Portrait, shortly after my parents had split up. And I got to sit down with her face to face and explain that, oh my gosh, your album was like the soundtrack to my childhood. And I used to sing Family Portrait at family gatherings. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. And she was just so down to earth and amazing. And yeah, all my family knew how much I love her. So they were just so excited for me that I got that opportunity.
Yeah, there was an amazing moment with the charity as well around that we did, and there was a great piece of social too. That's obviously big guests, big artists, but what about listeners? Any listeners over the years that have left a huge impression with you, Ken? I mean, you obviously have listeners on every day for the quiz that is Popmaster, and you have some...
I think it's the moving things that stay with you the longest. I had a letter once from the father of a young policeman who'd been killed. And it was just one of the most moving things I'd ever read. It wasn't meant to be broadcast. He just written to say, I'm really missing our boy, and just wanted you to know that we were listening to you and enjoying the show in some way. And then we thought, would he mind if we read this out? Because it was such a moving thing. And he gave us permission. We read it out. And it wasn't so much that I was in any way involved, because I wasn't really, but it was the fact that he had got so much comfort from listening to the radio, just on a daily basis, nothing specific to him, but just listening to the radio. He'd got a huge amount of comfort. And these are the moments that kind of stick with you, and you think, it's not just rabbiting away on the radio and playing bits of music. There is something else going on. And that's where you feel the real power of it. And it's, in many ways, a privilege to be able to be part of that.
Yeah, no, I think you underestimate sometimes the power of that relationship you have with the listener. Fleur?
Yeah, I think for me, it's similar to Ken, that you always remember when you've had an emotional impact on someone. And I think in particular during the pandemic, we spoke to so many people because we were sort of that comfort and that connection that they had to the outside world when we were all locked down. And we spoke to one particular listener called Elise, and she was running a local deli, and we used to talk to her every single morning. She'd send in pastries and things like that into the radio station, lovely treats. And then during the pandemic, she had to close the deli down. And we were talking to her throughout that whole experience, and her husband and her children. And she just kept saying, you're bringing me through this time. You bring me so much joy listening to you guys every morning. And we've been through that whole career change that her and her family had to go through. So yeah, things like that, connections and relationships like that mean so much to us and to them.
Yeah, and I think because everybody was going through it at the same time and together, and remote broadcasting and everything else. So potentially walking into a slight landmine with this one, but let's talk bosses. Have you ever heard a piece of advice that's stuck with you, maybe for the right reasons or maybe for the wrong reasons?
There was one time that Gary said, no, no, I'm gonna, I think, talk about Paul Gerard. Big up Paul Gerard, my boss, who you're the boss of. He said to me when I first started The Breakfast Show, just be your authentic self. Because I think I didn't really know what radio meant when I stepped into it. I was like, oh, do I have to be this presenter? Do I have to put on this voice? How do I present the content to everybody listening? And he just said, no, just tell your stories. As if you're talking to your friends in a pub around the table. And as soon as I kind of dropped that shiny, presenter voice, I felt that I connected with people a lot more. I felt like I didn't have to think about what I was doing. And like Ken said, you just left room for things to be spontaneous and just kept things real.
Yeah.
And that's the best part of advice.
That's really good advice. And Ken, I'm sure you've had plenty of bits of feedback over the years from various controllers and...
Yeah, it's more the way you react to bosses, I think, that's the important thing. Very, very important to say, great idea. What you must never say is, which is what I have said once before, I've learned the lesson, you must never say, yeah, we tried that 20 years ago, it didn't work then. So I've never said that to you, Gary, have I?
You haven't.
Yet.
Not yet, but you will. Okay, can we finish on, because the clock is flashing, can we finish on a career highlight, right? Something that you've been incredibly proud to have been involved in. And this obviously, if you look back over your whole career of broadcasting, and it's really hard this, but just say one thing, Ken.
Apart from Ella Fitzgerald, which was a high, doing the Olympics, the Seoul Olympics in 1988, I was hideously ill-equipped to do it, but I had a great time. It was a real privilege, and I worked alongside these fantastic sports broadcasters who just, I take my hat off to them. They were fabulous.
Amazing.
But yeah, what a moment. Great to be there.
I thought you were going to say Eurovision Song Contest. No, Fleur.
I think for me it was during the pandemic and when the Black Lives Matter movement was being discussed everywhere, and we decided to use the rap roulette to put the message across. And I did that rap roulette, and after that, I think because it was in lockdown and everybody was together, so many schools were using the rap roulette to teach the children about Black Lives Matter in various schools. And we were getting so many teachers contacting us. And I think that's probably one thing that I'm most proud of, and that I was part of that education for the younger generation.
Incredible, amazing. So I think we're out of time, but I'd like to say a huge thanks to Ken and Fleur for, I think, a brilliant session, and being really honest about, what goes into making amazing radio every single day. And so if we could put our hands together, please, and just give them a round of applause. And now, before anyone's allowed to go to the pub, we do have one more kind of bit of fun for you. It's time for me to hand over to these two to put two media leaders to the test in not Popmaster, but Media Master. Ken?
Thank you very much.
Not contrived at all. I'll let you explain.
Really kind. Gary Stein.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Gary Stein.